I caught my son-in-law hiding secrets, but I had patience and clarity. There are moments in life when you feel something shift in the air around you, like the stillness before thunder, when even the birds stop singing. That's how it began for me. Not with shouting or accusations, but with silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any confession. I'm Alice, 72 years old, and I've lived long enough to know that secrets have a smell to them. Something sour and desperate that clings to a person no matter how hard they try to hide it. My son-in-law, Daniel, had that smell. And I had all the time in the world to wait. Welcome back to Grandma Alice Stories, where I share the wisdom life has carved into these old bones. If this is your first time here, settle in with a cup of tea. These stories are meant to be felt, not rushed. And if you've been walking this road with me, I'm grateful for your company. Please, hit that subscribe button and help me reach 1,000 subscribers before next week. Your support means the world to this old heart. Now, let me tell you what happened. My daughter, Rebecca, has always been too trusting. It's not a fault, really. It's the way I raised her, to see goodness first, to believe in people. But sometimes, that same light that makes her beautiful also makes her blind. When she married Daniel 5 years ago, I stood in that church and cried tears of joy. He seemed perfect. Steady job as an accountant, gentle voice, the way he looked at her like she hung the moon. He was good to my grandchildren, Emma and little Jack. On paper, he was everything a mother could hope for. But paper doesn't show you everything. The first time I noticed something was off, it was a Tuesday evening. I remember because Tuesdays are my days with the children while Rebecca works her late shift at the hospital. Daniel usually came home around 6, loosened his tie, kissed the kids, asked about homework. Routine. Comfortable. But that Tuesday he came home at 8:30, and there was something different in his eyes. A distance, like his body was there but his mind was still somewhere else. Traffic, he said, not meeting my gaze. I nodded, stirring the pot of soup on the stove. I didn't say anything, but I noticed. And grandmothers, we have a way of collecting small details the way some people collect coins. Seemingly worthless alone, but valuable when you put them all together. The phone calls started next. He'd be sitting at the dinner table and his phone would buzz. Once, twice, 3 times. He'd glance at it, then flip it face down with a little too much force. Just work, he'd say. But work doesn't make a man's jaw tighten like that. Work doesn't make him excuse himself to the garage for 20 minutes. Speaking in hushed tones, he thinks no one can hear through the walls. I heard. These old ears work just fine. Then came the late nights. Big project at the firm, he'd tell Rebecca, kissing her forehead as she yawned, exhausted from her own 12-hour shift. Don't wait up. And she wouldn't. She'd fall asleep on the couch, trusting, believing, while I sat in the guest room upstairs, watching his car pull out of the driveway at 9, 10, 11 at night. I wanted to be wrong. God, how I wanted to be wrong. But a mother's instinct, a grandmother's instinct, it's like a muscle that never weakens. It only grows sharper with age. So I started paying closer attention. Not snooping, mind you, just observing, the way a bird watcher observes. Patient, quiet, waiting for the pattern to reveal itself. I noticed the cologne. Daniel had always been a simple man, soap and aftershave, nothing fancy. But suddenly there was something else. Something expensive and citrusy that clung to his shirts when I helped Rebecca with the laundry. When I asked him about it casually one Sunday, he said the firm had given out cologne samples at a corporate event. Maybe, maybe not. I noticed the receipts. One fell out of his jacket pocket when I hung it up after he left it draped over the kitchen chair. Valentino's, an Italian restaurant across town, the kind with candlelit tables and wine lists thicker than the Bible. The date was last Thursday. Rebecca had been working. I remembered because I'd picked up the kids from school. I folded the receipt carefully and tucked it into my pocket. Said nothing. Then there was the way he'd started looking at his phone like it held secrets worth dying for. Checking it constantly, angling the screen away when anyone walked by, keeping it in his hand even in the shower, I'd wager. Rebecca noticed that one too, but when she asked him about it, he laughed. You know how demanding clients can be, honey. I just need to stay responsive. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? She loved him. But I'd been married for 43 years before my Henry passed. I knew what love looked like. I also knew what lying looked like. And Daniel was lying. The breaking point, the moment I knew I couldn't just observe anymore, came 3 weeks ago. It was late afternoon, and I'd driven to the grocery store on Maple Street, the one near Daniel's office. I wasn't following him. Not intentionally. But as I was loading bags into my trunk, I saw his car pull into the parking lot of the coffee shop across the street. And he wasn't alone. A woman stepped out of the passenger side. Younger than Rebecca. Blonde hair that caught the sunlight. She was laughing at something he said, her hand resting on his arm in a way that was far too familiar, far too comfortable. He opened the coffee shop door for her, his hand briefly touching the small of her back. A gesture I'd seen him do with my daughter 1,000 times. My hands froze on the grocery bags. My heart hammered in my chest like it was trying to break free. I stood there, hidden behind my car, watching them through the coffee shop window. They sat close. Too close. She reached across the table and took his hand. He didn't pull away. I drove home in a fog. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I wanted to call Rebecca right then, wanted to scream the truth into the phone until anyone, heard me. But I didn't, because truth without proof is just accusation. And accusations without evidence can tear families apart just as surely as betrayal can. So I made a decision that day, standing in my kitchen with tears streaming down my face, while I put away groceries I couldn't even remember buying. I would wait. I would watch. I would collect every single piece of evidence until there was no room for doubt, no space for him to lie his way out. Because my daughter deserved the truth. My grandchildren deserved better than a father who wore lies like a second skin. And Daniel needed to learn that you can't build a life on deception and expect it to stand. I started keeping a notebook. Dates, times, places. I took photographs on my phone. His car parked outside that coffee shop, outside restaurants, outside an apartment complex I'd never seen before. I saved receipts. I wrote down every late night, every hushed phone call, every time he smelled like perfume that wasn't Rebecca's. It became my mission, not out of revenge. I'm too old for revenge. But out of love. The kind of love that protects, even when protection means breaking someone's heart to save them from something worse. And Daniel had no idea. He thought I was just a harmless old woman who baked cookies and babysat grandchildren. He had no idea that behind these tired eyes was a woman who'd survived loss, heartbreak, and decades of life's hardest lessons. He had no idea that patience is the sharpest weapon a grandmother can wield. Last night, Daniel came home at midnight. Rebecca was already asleep. I was sitting in the living room, the only light coming from the lamp beside me, my notebook open on my lap. He froze when he saw me, his keys jangling in his hand. "Alice," he said, trying to smile. "You're up late." "So are you," I replied softly. For just a moment our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw it, the flicker of fear. He knew. Somewhere deep down, he knew I was watching. But what he didn't know was just how much I'd already seen, and how soon everything would come crashing down. They say the truth will set you free. But what they don't tell you is that first it has to break you open. And I was about to break my son-in-law wide open, piece by careful piece. Because Daniel had underestimated me. He'd mistaken my silence for ignorance, my patience for weakness. But I was neither ignorant nor weak. I was simply waiting for the right moment. The moment when the truth would be so undeniable that even his silver tongue couldn't talk his way out of it. The morning after our midnight encounter, Daniel left the house earlier than usual. I heard his car pull out of the driveway at 6:30, the engine cutting through the quiet dawn like a confession he wasn't ready to make. Rebecca came downstairs 20 minutes later, still in her scrubs from the night shift, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, exhaustion etched into every line of her beautiful face. "Morning, Mama," she said, pouring herself coffee with hands that trembled slightly from fatigue. I watched her from my seat at the kitchen table, my heart breaking in ways I hadn't known were still possible at my age. How do you tell your daughter that the man she loves, the father of her children, is living a double life? How do you shatter someone's world when they're already so tired, so worn down by the weight of just surviving? Not yet, I told myself. Not without every piece in place. "You work too hard, sweetheart," I said instead, reaching over to squeeze her hand. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Someone has to keep the lights on. Daniel's been so stressed with work lately. They're talking about layoffs at the firm. He's been putting in extra hours to prove himself." Layoffs. Extra hours. The lies rolled off her tongue so easily because she believed them, because he'd fed them to her with such conviction that she'd swallowed every single one. "Has he?" I asked carefully, sipping my own tea. "Yeah. He feels terrible about missing so much family time, but..." She shrugged, that same trusting shrug I'd seen 1,000 times. "We'll get through it. We always do." I said nothing, just nodded. But inside, something hardened in me. A resolve that felt like steel settling into my bones. After Rebecca left to catch a few hours of sleep before picking up the kids from school, I opened my laptop. My grandson Jack had taught me how to use it last year, patient as a saint while I fumbled with passwords and mouse clicks. "Grandma," he'd said, laughing, "you're better at this than you think." He was right. I'd gotten very good at research. I pulled up the folder I'd created, labeled simply Evidence. Inside were photographs, screenshots of credit card statements I'd glimpsed when Daniel left his wallet open on the counter, notes from conversations I'd overheard. 3 months' worth of documentation. 3 months of watching my daughter's husband unravel his own marriage thread by thread. But I needed more. I needed the kind of proof that couldn't be explained away, couldn't be dressed up in convenient excuses about work stress or traffic or client meetings. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired someone. His name was Marcus, a private investigator whose number I'd found online. He was younger than I expected, mid-40s, kind eyes, the sort of man who probably had daughters of his own. When we met at a small diner across town, I'd brought my notebook and half my savings in an envelope. "Mrs. Henderson," he'd said, shaking my hand with a gentleness that told me he understood. "Tell me what you need." And I did. I told him everything. The late nights, the perfume, the woman at the coffee shop, the receipts from restaurants and hotels. I told him about Rebecca's exhaustion, about my grandchildren's innocent questions about why Daddy was never home. I told him I needed the truth, documented and undeniable. Marcus had listened, taking notes, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he'd closed his notebook and looked at me with something like respect. "I'll find out what he's doing," he'd said. "But Mrs. Henderson, are you prepared for what the truth might look like?" "I've been preparing my whole life," I'd replied. "That was 2 weeks ago. This morning," Marcus called. "I have what you need," he said simply. "Can you meet me?" My hands shook as I drove to the diner. Not from fear, from anticipation. From the weight of knowing that once I saw whatever Marcus had found, there would be no going back. This wasn't just about confirming my suspicions anymore. This was about arming myself with the kind of truth that changes everything. Marcus was waiting in the same booth we'd met in before. He had a manila folder in front of him, thick with papers. When I sat down, he slid it across the table without preamble. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I opened the folder. The first photograph nearly knocked the breath out of me. Daniel and the blonde woman, walking hand in hand into an apartment building. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. The same Tuesday Rebecca had been working a double shift. The same Tuesday I'd been watching Emma and Jack. The next photo showed them on a balcony, wine glasses in hand, her head resting on his shoulder. Then more. Daniel kissing her in a parking garage. Daniel carrying groceries into that same apartment building. Daniel's car parked outside overnight. Multiple nights, multiple timestamps, all carefully documented. But it was the final document that made my blood run cold. A lease agreement for the apartment in Daniel's name, starting 6 months ago. 6 months. He'd been maintaining a second home, a second life, for half a year, while Rebecca worked herself to exhaustion. While my grandchildren asked why Daddy was always too busy to read them bedtime stories. While I watched my daughter's light slowly dim, too trusting to see what was happening right in front of her. "There's more," Marcus said gently. "The woman's name is Vanessa Clark. She's 28. Works as a receptionist at a dental office downtown. According to the neighbors I spoke with, she believes Daniel is divorced. He told her his ex-wife has the kids most of the time. His ex-wife. My daughter wasn't even his wife anymore in this alternate reality he'd created. She was just an inconvenient obstacle to his fantasy life." I closed the folder carefully, my hands steady now. The shaking had stopped. In its place was something cold and clear: purpose. "How much do I owe you?" I asked. Marcus waved his hand. "You paid enough up front. Mrs. Henderson." He hesitated. "What are you going to do with this?" I looked at him. This kind stranger who'd helped me uncover my family's unraveling, and I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd just been handed ammunition after months of being defenseless. "I'm going to protect my daughter," I said, "the way I should have done the moment I first suspected." "Be careful," Marcus warned. "Men like Daniel, when they're cornered, they can get desperate. Dangerous, even. So can grandmothers," I replied. I drove home with the folder on my passenger seat. Marcus's words echoing in my mind. Be careful. But careful had gotten me here. 3 months of watching, waiting, gathering evidence while my daughter's heart was being slowly broken by a man who'd promised to cherish her forever. No, it was time to stop being careful. It was time to be ruthless. That evening, Daniel came home at his usual time. 6:15, like clockwork, like the dutiful husband returning from an honest day's work. He kissed Rebecca on the cheek. He asked the kids about school. He sat down at the dinner table I'd set, smiling that practiced smile that I now knew was built on lies. And I smiled back, because in 3 days it would be Thanksgiving. The whole family would be here, Rebecca's brother and his wife, cousins, the children. Everyone Daniel cared about impressing. Everyone whose opinion mattered to him. 3 days. That's all I needed. Daniel had no idea that his last peaceful meal was already behind him. And I was finally ready to serve him the truth. Thanksgiving has always been about gratitude in my family. About gathering around a table laden with food and love. About counting blessings and remembering what matters most. But this Thanksgiving would be different. This year, we wouldn't just be counting blessings, we'd be counting lies. And Daniel's were about to run out. The days leading up to Thanksgiving passed like a slow-motion countdown. I moved through them with a calmness that surprised even me, going through the motions of holiday preparations while the manila folder sat hidden in my bedroom closet, waiting like a loaded gun. I baked pies, pumpkin, apple, pecan, filling the house with the warm sense of cinnamon and nutmeg. I polished the good silverware that had been my mother's. I ironed the tablecloth white and pristine, the same one we'd used for every Thanksgiving since Rebecca was a little girl. Everything had to be perfect, because the moment I'd been planning, the reckoning I'd been building toward, deserved the right stage. Daniel was nervous. I could see it in the way he moved around me, careful and watchful, like a man walking through a minefield. He knew something had shifted between us that night. He came home late and found me waiting. But he didn't know how much. He couldn't possibly know. "Alice," he said on Wednesday evening, catching me alone in the kitchen while Rebecca was upstairs bathing the children. "Is everything okay between us?" I looked up from the turkey I was preparing, meeting his eyes directly. Why wouldn't it be, Daniel? I don't know. You just seem. He trailed off, searching for the right word. Distant. I'm 72 years old, I said mildly, returning my attention to the bird. I'm entitled to be distant sometimes. Age does that to a person. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Right? Of course. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't done anything to upset you. Oh, Daniel, if you only knew. You haven't done anything to me, I said, emphasizing the last word just slightly. Let him chew on that. He left the kitchen quickly after that, and I permitted myself a small smile. The mouse was beginning to sense the trap, even if he couldn't see it yet. Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and clear. The house filled with family by noon. My son Thomas and his wife Jennifer. Their teenage twins, Rebecca's cousin Marie and her husband. The children ran through the rooms, their laughter bouncing off the walls like music. Rebecca was radiant despite her exhaustion, thrilled to have everyone together. She'd even taken the day off work, a rarity. Daniel played his part beautifully. The attentive husband, the devoted father, the helpful son-in-law. He carved the turkey with practiced ease, made jokes that had everyone laughing, refilled wine glasses before they were empty. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed the performance myself. But I did know better, and I'd made sure that everyone who mattered would know too. We ate, we talked, we shared stories and memories, the way families do when they're gathered and grateful. And through it all, I watched Daniel. Watched the way he checked his phone under the table when he thought no one was looking. Watched the way his smile faltered when he thought Rebecca wasn't watching. Watched the way he avoided looking at me directly, as if eye contact might somehow expose him. After dinner, as Rebecca and Jennifer cleared the plates and the men settled into the living room with football on the television, I excused myself. My heart was pounding now, adrenaline coursing through veins I'd thought were too old for such intensity. This was it, the moment I'd been building toward for 3 months. I retrieved the manila folder from my bedroom closet. Inside, I'd organized everything carefully, photographs in chronological order, credit card statements highlighted in yellow, the lease agreement, even a thumb drive that Marcus had given me containing video footage of Daniel entering and leaving Vanessa's apartment. I'd also prepared envelopes. One for Rebecca, one for Thomas, one for Daniel himself. I took a breath, steadying myself. Then I walked back downstairs. Everyone, I said, my voice cutting through the comfortable post-dinner haze. Could you all come to the dining room, please? I have something important to share. Rebecca looked up from the sink, curious. Mama? What is it? Just come, sweetheart. All of you. There was something in my tone. Something that made everyone stop what they were doing and follow me. Even the children, sensing the shift in atmosphere, grew quiet. Daniel came last, his face pale, his eyes darting to the folder in my hands. He knew. In that moment, he finally knew. We gathered around the dining table. The same table we just shared a meal at. The same table that had held so many family celebrations over the years. Felt right, somehow, that this would happen here. That the place where we'd broken bread together would also be where we'd break open the truth. Mama, what's going on? Rebecca asked, a nervous laugh escaping her. You're scaring me. I'm sorry, my darling, I said softly, looking at my daughter. My beautiful, trusting, exhausted daughter. I'm so sorry, but there's something you need to know. Something everyone needs to know. I placed the folder on the table. Daniel, I said, turning to face him directly. Would you like to tell them, or should I? His face had gone from pale to gray. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Alice, I don't know what you think. I don't think, Daniel. I know. My voice was steady, calm, like I was discussing the weather. I know about Vanessa Clark. I know about the apartment on Riverside Drive that you've been paying for since May. I know about the dinners at Valentino's, The weekend trips you told Rebecca were work conferences. The life you've been living while my daughter worked herself to the bone trying to keep this family afloat. The room went silent, deathly silent. Even the children had stopped moving. Rebecca's face transformed, confusion giving way to understanding, understanding giving way to horror. What? Mama, what are you? Daniel, what is she talking about? Rebecca, honey, she's confused. Daniel started, but I cut him off. I'm not confused. I'm 72, not senile. I opened the folder and spread the photographs across the table like playing cards. These were taken over the past 2 weeks by a private investigator I hired. But I've been watching you for 3 months, Daniel. 3 months of collecting evidence while you lied to my daughter's face every single day. Rebecca's hands trembled as she reached for the photographs. I watched her face as she looked through them, watched her world crumble in real time. Thomas stood up, his fists clenched, moving toward Daniel with murder in his eyes. You son of a... Thomas, sit down, I said firmly. This isn't about violence. This is about truth. Rebecca was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face as she shuffled through photograph after photograph. Daniel and Vanessa holding hands. Daniel and Vanessa kissing. Daniel carrying groceries into an apartment that wasn't theirs. How long? Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking. How long, Daniel? He sat frozen, trapped, all his carefully constructed lies falling apart like wet paper. 6 months, I answered for him. The lease started in May, but I suspect the affair started before that. Didn't it, Daniel? He didn't answer, couldn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. Rebecca stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Get out. Rebecca, please, let me explain. Get out. She was screaming now, all that exhaustion and betrayal pouring out in a voice I'd never heard from her before. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. The children. You should have thought about the children before you decided to play house with someone else. Thomas roared, stepping between Daniel and Rebecca. You heard her. Get out. Daniel looked around the room, at the family that had welcomed him, at the children who were crying now, confused and scared, at Rebecca whose heart he'd shattered, and finally at me. And I looked back at him with no pity, no satisfaction, just cold, clear certainty. You brought this on yourself, I said quietly. Every single choice that led to this moment was yours, and now you get to live with the consequences. He left, grabbed his keys with shaking hands and walked out the door, while Rebecca collapsed into Thomas's arms, sobbing. The children clung to me, and I held them close, whispering reassurances I wasn't sure I believed myself. The Thanksgiving table, so carefully set, so lovingly prepared, sat abandoned with its evidence scattered across the white tablecloth like wounds. But the truth was finally free, and sometimes that's all the justice you need. In the weeks that followed, Rebecca filed for divorce. Daniel tried to fight it at first, tried to paint me as a meddling mother-in-law who destroyed his marriage. But the evidence spoke louder than his protests. He got supervised visitation with the children and alimony payments that would keep Rebecca and the kids comfortable while she rebuilt their lives. As for me, I learned that patience isn't just about waiting. It's about knowing exactly when to stop waiting and act. It's about loving someone enough to break their heart today so they don't waste years of their life on someone who doesn't deserve them. Daniel thought I was just a harmless old woman. He learned too late that a grandmother's love is the most dangerous force in the world when her family is threatened. And Rebecca? She's healing. Slowly, beautifully, surely. She's starting to smile again, laugh again, dream again. That's all I ever wanted. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Grandma Alice Stories and hit that notification bell. Help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can continue sharing these lessons about love, loss, and the wisdom that comes from living long enough to know that truth always finds its way to light. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, family isn't about blind loyalty. It's about protecting the ones you love, even when the truth hurts. Until next time, my dears, take care of each other.